There was a little bit of extra revenue that was supporting through that about how special ed is funded at the state level. So that's a decrease of about $200,000 in revenue. And then just a miscellaneous reductions in revenue of about $56,000. All right, moving on to the expenditure side.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can we just go back, so the decrease in special ed, can you like elaborate a little bit more where that $200,000, like, or do I have to ask like for an itemized, like, I was just curious.
The revenue?
That one and also for the
So this is the revenue side. So it's additional revenue that was in place because those itinerants were payrolled through the ISD. Then they're allowed to charge, there was an indirect charge, so they knew there were costs for our end. They were getting additional money from the state to support that based on that arrangement. And now that they're coming back in-house, that money is no longer available.
Okay, so, can I just forgive me for just a second? So so does that look like we're not having money come in, so then we're gonna ask for it elsewhere? Is that, we're just showing the decrease of what's not coming in, correct?
Correct.
So is that eliminating any jobs in that category?
No.
No.
There are no changes to those positions.
Thanks.
All right, so let's move on to expense then. We have a decrease in number of teaching positions, and we're doing it all through attrition, so there are not any layoffs with this. We're looking at 6.4 elementary teachers, 3.8 middle school teachers, and 5.4 high school teachers. And that will result in a decrease of about $2.4 million of expense. This next bullet is related to the ESSER. So if you recall, we used our ESSER 3 funding to support a little bit of our elementary teachers, right? About, it just varied what percentage of an elementary teacher. With that ESSER funding going away, we now need to bring that cost fully back in. So it's an additional cost of $2.5 million that's returning back to the general fund. And we've talked about that throughout the year. The next three bullets, you see those same descriptions and the same figures as we saw on the revenue side. Our grants are neutral. Revenues and expense always equal. So you see a reduction of ESSER 2, reduction of ESSER 3, and then the $28,000 for the other grants. On the right-hand side, we have an increase in our center program tuition of about $350,000. That is the initial estimate that we were provided. The ISD operates center programs on behalf of all the local school districts within our intermediate school districts, so they're projecting a $350,000 increase. We have an increase in utilities and snow removal built in. We've talked about snow removal, I think that was a couple meetings ago perhaps, that you approved that renewal of the provider for that. There's a slight uptick there. We're planning on a slight uptick in our utilities, of course, as we move through the year. We'll amend that if necessary. This next one is probably going to take just a quick minute of explaining. Decrease ESSER indirect expense offset. So a lot of times when we get grants, we are allowed to charge what we call an indirect cost. And it's to help offset what they view as additional costs that the district is incurring to actually have the grant. When you think about processing payroll or issuing a purchase order, or maybe we're hiring some staff, so there's additional work that's in our human resources office, technology. So those are some examples of the departments that they considered an indirect cost. So they know that there are costs related to those grants, but it's not like you can say that Julie Davis definitively spends 2% of her time on this grant. So there's a formula that we have to follow. We submit it every year. It's due June 1 of every year. We turn it into the state and they approve what our indirect rate is. So that really goes to offset, because you were already paying me to be here, right? They just know there's some additional costs. So when those grants go away, the indirect with them goes away as well. So it kind of increases our costs, is a different way to look at it, because our bottom line changes, we're not getting that additional support. Does that kind of make sense? I'm gonna pause. And it just looks big this year because ESSER's a large grant, right? In our prior grants that we've had, you know, if there was a little one that went away, it was a grant that was $50,000 and indirect was $200. So it's not as significant as ESSER. The next line, we'll have our new superintendent, and with that contract that's authorized, I need to record that increase of expense. And then lastly is decrease in just a multitude of items for $23,000. All right. So here's what's not in our budget right now. Any increase for employee wages. We are negotiating with all of our employee groups, and so we did not bake in any increase in this. So when we're going to see the figures here in just a minute, know that that's not in there. What's also not in there is any change to non-teaching staffing levels. I just showed you that we are reducing some teachers, but in this budget, we don't have any non-teaching staffing levels reduced, other than if they were in that ESSER grant or with that qualification. So there could be positions that we add, and there could be positions that we reduce out of here. There's also no savings from replacing any of the retirees. So we had a large number of retirees this year, as you're well aware. Some of those positions, like I just said a few minutes ago, we aren't replacing, but those that we are, there will be slight savings from that. That is not built into this at all. We will capture that in the first budget amendment that we bring to you next year. All right, so let's get into the numbers. In the first column for 2023-2024 budget, that is our current budget that we have that you amended back in March of 2024. And then that middle column is what we're proposing for an amendment to this current year's budget. And then 2024-2025 is what we're proposing for next year's budget. So you can see that if you go across there, our local and our state, our changes, not big changes there. You can see in the federal line though, where the ESSER falls off, right? When you look at the middle column of $8.2 million, moving down to just under 2.8 for next year. That's really that ESSER funding. So bottom line, our revenue right now on the books is about $135.7 million. We're recommending to amend that to about $138.7 for this current year, and then our proposed for next year is just under 131.6. All right, moving on to the expenditure side. Same concept, right? The first column is our current year budget. The middle is our recommended amendment to this budget. And then that last one is next year's proposed budget. And you can see all of the change. I'm not going to read through these numbers, but you can see the bottom line is we're about 136.3 right now. We're recommending bumping that up to 137.7. And then pulling that down for next year to 133. Again, a big chunk of that's ESSER, a chunk of it are some position reductions. And we're going to go through those changes for you in just a second here. All right, and then just a summary of our total revenue and total expense. Our projected use or addition to fund balance. So right, our current budget has us using about $600,000 of fund balance. In our amendment, we are proposing that we will actually add just under $1 million. And again, that's if we spend every dollar, which we know we won't. So, you know, it'll be somewhere above that $1 million of add. And then for next year, we're looking at a use of about $1.5 million of fund balance. So going from a fund balance of 17.9 for this year ending, amending that to 19.5, and then looking at next year being, pulling that back down to 18. Special revenue fund, which we are also looking at today. I just realized something I said, but that wasn't, that was right, I already went through our assumptions, sorry. Special revenue fund, so we're also presenting to you special revenue fund, and so we also create some budget assumptions for that. We're assuming the Michigan School Meals Program is continuing for next year. But we also know we have some slight changes, so on the food service side, we know our commodities is going down just a tad, that 75,000. There was a one-time bump up for this current year. And then here too, we're also being conservative and pulling down interest income. On the expense side, for childcare, we have some additional staff this year with some overlay, so that individual actually just retired. So we'll be able to pull down expenditures there. And they had some money in budget and equipment, we pulled that down. And then in food service, pulled down some equipment. There's that counterpart commodities is a revenue and expense, they tie, so there's that pull down. A slight uptick in food, milk, and non-food items as the cost of everything continues to climb, so we're expecting about $78,000 there. At our June meeting, regular meeting, the board approved the contract for Chartwell, so there's a slight uptick there, $15,000. And then the other program that's in special revenue fund besides childcare and food service is our student and school activities. So those are all programs that are supporting all of those things. When you think of National Honor Society as an example of one that's in there. Some athletic things are in there as well. That we're gonna pull that down about $60,000. That's really all, as the revenue comes in, they spend it. So we don't overspend that one typically, because we don't underspend if the revenue's not there to support it. And then just some miscellaneous adjustments of about $17,000. All right, so I thought sometimes pie charts are easier to read and understand. There's a bunch of numbers I threw at you. So I thought it would be good to compare our current fiscal year proposed amendment with next year's proposed budget in terms of those different types of expenditures. So when you think of salaries and benefits, and then supplies, materials, and purchase services. So just to give you an idea, and I know those numbers are a little bit smaller, I couldn't get them any bigger, so I'm sorry. Or bolder, I tried. So, you know, we are, there's a slight change. It's not significant. Purchase services is staying, you know, pretty close to the same, and same thing for supplies and materials. So, you know, salaries and benefits typically around about 80%. You know, it varies just a little bit. Okay. Special revenue fund, here are all the numbers, and we're looking at ending this year. Our proposed amendment is ending at a little under $6.4 million. That's across all three of those programs. And next year we're proposing to use another $200,000 of that for $6.1 million. All right, and the very last slide is our proposed millage for next year. That's a requirement of this hearing. So our operating millage, that helps our day-to-day operations, right? That's a part of that per pupil foundation allowance, right? We collect some of it through taxes, property taxes, and the rest the state makes up the difference. Because our community authorized for 2024 and 2025 a 0.5 mil increase to that, we're able to do a full restoration up to the 18 mils, which is fantastic. That's what is helping us out a lot. But just in history, you can kind of see we've had a rollback in 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. For our current year, this was the year that we didn't have a rollback, but there is another rollback for next year. However, because the community authorized that $0.5 mil, we were still able to levy, we'll still be able to levy the full 18 mils, and then still have a little bit of extra mills in case we have to roll back next year. Gets a little complicated, but know that that $0.5 mil of authorization from our community was extremely important for us. We also have a recreation millage, and so that too is subject to rollback if property tax values grow faster than the rate of inflation. You can see there, the community authorized a 1.0 renewal to that because that one was set to expire. So they authorized that back in 2022 for the 2024, which is where we're at now. But because of the rollback, we can't quite levy the full 1.0 mills. We're only able to levy 0.9946. And then the last millage to talk about here today is our debt millage, and we're looking at levying another 6.05 mils. That is levied on all properties, homestead and non-homestead, and that's no change from our current year. That rate stays the same. All right, that is what I have for you for the hearing. Any other questions?
I just have a couple. The one on the expense for decrease the student and school activities, like 60K, is that like we're just reducing the amount that they're allowed in those categories, or did we get rid of programs?
No, we didn't get rid of any programs. It is really, for that particular program, Holly, that particular fund, is really driven by the programs and their fundraising. And then they spend what they raised the funds for. And some of them have a little bit of a fund balance as well. They maintain a little bit. So, in our crystal ball and trying to figure out what might they be spending next year, we just were conservative and pulled it down. But if they're bringing in money and they're spending it, we will then adjust it accordingly.
That's probably based on what they did this last year, kind of looking at maybe projecting for the future.
Yep.
And so I was just curious, because I know we had Odyssey of the Mind brought to us last year, so I didn't know if that's under this category at all.
There is a little bit of, there's an Odyssey of Mind category in this, but that isn't, the Odyssey of Mind in this is what's used for fundraising to get them to state finals and to worlds. It's not for the basic, the cost of the coordinators, for example. The cost of the coordinators right now are in our general fund.
There's one other, you got a miscellaneous account of 23,000 extra decrease or whatever. Like you said, it's like a bunch of miscellaneous categories. And then in this, it's asking to propose the amendment to the budget for money that we need to spend, right? That's on one of these, sorry. I have a question about the extra $23,000 that was brought to us by the contractor. Is that included in here as an increase for us anywhere, or is that in the general fund? We got a big check a few months ago, $23,000.
Oh, from the donation from Tower Pinkster?
Yeah.
That is in the current year revenue.
That is.
So it's, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
All right.
Thank you, sorry.
Because that would be an amendment, right? Because it wasn't in our proposed.
It was, well, we project the amount of revenue that's coming in. So we have a miscellaneous revenue account, and that's under the local, if it's miscellaneous local. And so we do estimates, and so if we made any adjustments, it would have been in there, yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Thank you very much. You also have a packet that has much of this information along with some of the historical information, similar to what's in our community budget guide to give everybody a history. But if you've got questions, everything that we walked through here today is also in your packet.
Thank you, Julie. I know this is a huge amount of work for you and your team, and every year on top of all the other things that you do. So you do an excellent job of getting all of these numbers together and keeping us on track. And
Okay,
it's very much appreciated.
I just thought of one question.
Oh, go
And maybe this is not a fair question, and so you can tell me if it's not a fair question. Do you have any estimation? I know you don't have baked into this any salary increases for employees. Do you have an estimation of what could that potentially look like? Or is that just really not a great question right at this point?
It's an an okay question,
Okay.
I just can't
You don't
answer
know.
it, right?
Okay.
Because we're negotiating
Yes,
with all of
okay.
the employee groups.
Okay.
You know, we've met several times with our teacher group.
Yeah.
And we've just started to meet with some of the other groups and, you know, we're still early in the process and really don't have a sense.
Okay, I just didn't know if historically you had like a roundabout, but I get it.
Could I ask a part B to that question, just with pure data? Because last year we proposed the same thing, we were negotiating still, so we didn't make any assumptions into last year's. I am trying to even recall what the across the board was in terms of steps and increases.
Yeah.
Do you know what that dollar amount
Yeah.
amounted to for last fiscal year?
Well, I
After
think
after the thing was negotiated?
I think, I'm
And that-
figuring in my
and-
head,
yeah.
I think cost of step and 1% for all employee groups was around $2 million. So to give you an idea of what that would be.
I have another question. This has gotta be approved by the 30th of June, right?
Correct.
So as a board, if we ever decided to make changes or ask for something to be trimmed more, right, which is our prerogative, correct? I don't know, I've never been on the end of that before. So I'm just curious, that we have to do it in between now and the 30th, correct?
Yes.
Like if we said, hey, we need the budget trimmed another $2 million or whatever, then we have to do that. Is that today, or do we have to do another special meeting and then come back before the 30th before we vote on this?
I would think that you would, in your vote, you would, if you did not approve the resolutions that we're presenting for you to see today, then we would have to go back, make changes, and bring that back to, or call another special meeting and present a revised budget.
Could you, I'm sorry, really quick, or you can maybe just tell me, there was a slide that just showed fund balance then proposed for the end of next fiscal year.
Don't
With
want
these-
that summary page?
Yeah, I was just, I
And
had
I
it
don't
in
know
my
how
head.
these got out of order either, so.
So 14 at the end of this year, and then,
19 and a half.
yeah, and then presumably the use of some fund balance next year, yeah.
Correct.
That's still 13.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Julie.
Mhm.
All right, Elizabeth, are there any public comments on the budget? None, okay, thank you. All right, we will then move on to all of the things that we have to approve. And because we didn't have any prior meetings, we're going to do each of them individually rather than as a consent agenda. So first, could I please have a motion to approve the minutes from our June 10th regular meeting?
I move we approve the minutes from the June 10th regular meeting.
And the special meeting, I'm sorry, yes, and the special meeting.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay, can we, I think we can just do a voice vote on approving minutes.
Oh, I think the voice vote.
Yeah, voice vote.
I will vote.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right. Are these set now, or I'm supposed to touch this to turn that on? I just realized, I thought that they were voice activated, so my apologies if my voice has not been picking up. Okay, next, can I please have a motion to amend the General Fund Appropriations Act Amendment Resolution with the available funds $157,249,723 and appropriations of $137,742,215.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on that?
I guess I'm just gonna bring up 5, 6, 7, and 8. I mean, I would like to propose something different, to ask for a trim of the budget in some different categories and then have it come back. I feel like we're walking into some turbulent times coming up, and I feel like we need to see some different changes done.
Would that just be 7 and 8 then? Would that just be 7 and 8 then?
As it, this
Seven and
is,
eight,
this
yep.
is the number of,
Sorry,
yes,
seven.
it's just for
Thanks, Becky.
amending this budget.
Yeah.
Reflect actuals.
We're voting on these things separately,
Each of them are separate.
and
Sorry,
separate discussions, right? Okay.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on item 5? Okay, can we please have a roll call vote?
Yes. Dr. Michelle?
Yes.
Ms. Sabor?
Yes.
Ms. Cavell?
Yes.
Dr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mrs. Strang, yes.
Number 6, can I have a motion to amend the Special Revenue Fund Appropriations Act Amendment Resolution with the available funds $15,886,975 and appropriations of $9,498,326.
So moved.
A second.
Any discussion on this? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yep. Dr. Michelle?
Yes.
Ms. Sabor?
No.
Ms. Cavell?
Yes.
Dr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mrs. Strang, yes.
Okay. Number 7, can I have a motion to adopt the 2024-2025 General Fund Appropriations Act Resolution with the available funds $151,081,095 and appropriations of $133,078,797.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on that. Okay, then can we have a roll call vote?
Sure. Dr. Michelle?
Yes.
Ms. Sabor?
No.
Ms. Cavell?
Yes.
Dr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mrs. Strang, yes.
Number 7, can I have a motion to adopt the 2024-2025 Special Revenue Fund Appropriations Act Resolution with the available funds $15,472,632 and appropriations of $9,324,451.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this one?
I mean, I can discuss it, but I already know where the vote's gonna go, so I mean.
I guess I'm just curious,
Well,
what
we
did you
wanna
want
know
to,
why.
what
I
did
guess
you
I
like to try?
think what I'd like to do is I would like to, I mean, I wish the whole team was here, but I would like to talk about just like some other areas and categories. I feel like sometimes when we walk into some of this stuff, you know, and even going forward for the proposed budget, is that we always seem to be trimming from the bottom, you know, on different things and what's happening. And I mean, I'm looking at and I'm hearing about a lot of stuff that's happening of things that we're getting rid of or things that are we're not replacing.
Like what,
You know,
can you give us examples?
Like Dave Howard, are we replacing his job? We're replacing him, and I'm hearing we're not.
You build internally?
Right, but it's not going to be the same thing, so what are we doing to our students? Do you know what I mean? So I guess I would love, I mean, I personally would love to have a meeting where the 7 of us are together and walking through this individually instead of, you know, kind of always just pushing this stuff through. I mean, it's like, we're getting the information, but I wanna talk about it. Like, I'm
What else do you have? You said a lot.
Well, there's, like when we ran into the thing last year with Odyssey of the Mind, and that came up later. I mean, these are the things that I would like to hear about way ahead of time and walk through. For instance, I just went to Caledonia Public School. They asked their team to trim the budget. When have we ever asked the budget to be trimmed, to trim the budget by over $2 million? And the superintendent walked through and showed all the changes that were to be made for the different categories and stuff, and it was all categories. It wasn't just, you know, what we would say that, like getting rid of, AIDS or, different things like that. So I guess today's the 20th, we have to have this done by the 30th. So,
Okay, couple thoughts on that. I mean, from my perspective only, I mean, first off, Caledonia is not a peer school, but, that's just its own separate thing. But, about Dave Howard or other positions that would be, moved from what the courses are that he taught to other teachers within the school. So I was quite upset when I first heard about Dave Howard's position not being filled. But what that is it's the specific position that he himself taught and the courses that he taught. Those courses now go to other people. Now, I can understand the frustration because his particular position would be the kind of position that I personally would be teaching. And when it comes to a teacher building a legacy, when we say, how do we replace him? We can't ever replace him. Like, he built that program, what he taught was how he taught it, the way he taught it. Even if we found a person who would teach those specific courses, it's not like we're replacing Dave Howard. So if those courses move to other teachers, it's maybe not ideal in the hopes that we could, find someone who could truly replace him, but it does make sense when it comes to how courses are moved and assigned. So I know that when I first heard about it, I immediately talked to administration and I said, I want to know the details on this topic. and had that explained to me in a way that, of course, as someone who's experienced these things over the years, I'm like, oh my gosh, of course, that makes sense. So it's not that we're not replacing him. His courses are just going to other people. He really though, I mean, I just want to say, look at him, he's irreplaceable. He's a legend in
perhaps
West
one of
Michigan.
those other teachers that takes some of the stuff will grow to
Yes,
become
that
the
may
next
be,
Dave
and then
Howard.
maybe those classes end up moving to that person over time, but, yeah, I think when I first heard about it, I first discussed it with administration and learned more details and was able to understand, okay, this is why the decisions are being made, and I can feel like I am behind those decisions as a result. So when you said, oh, well, I mean, this was brought up and we haven't had a chance to talk about it, I know I took a chance to talk about it back when it was, first raised as an issue. So that's what brought me to come to the conclusion that I feel okay with the decisions being made here. So that's, just speaking for myself as an example of why would I feel okay? I mean, I'm not just pushing it through. I did talk about it, I did learn about it, and then decided that I do agree with the way that it's being handled. Or I
You
can,
can.
I can agree with the way it's being handled.
Right, and no, go ahead, CJ.
Well, I'm just trying to follow, I guess, and figure out, because again, we've gone from a macro budget to down to one FTE that we're, talking about right now. And Dave Howard, as I'm looking at this, is 1 out of 16 FTEs that is being attrition. And so we have which is not our job to mingle in each FTE and figure out what needs to be replaced or what needs to not be replaced. And what are we saying about the other 15 FTEs that are being attrition when we're highlighting Dave Howard's position as being irreplaceable? All that notwithstanding, what it sounds like you're arguing for is that he should have been replaced, which would mean we'd be spending more money. But your first comment was, what if we trim the budget further, which would mean to spend less money? So I'm trying to figure out because we can talk about what do you have a particular section of this budget that you think is
Right, well,
appropriate?
so I guess what I'm saying too is like Dave's an example of one, like you said, of 16, okay? I think the thing what I'm looking at is I'm looking at from a standpoint of like last year what Odyssey the Nine did, right? What was it doing for kids if we got rid of the program?
But that was a negotiated term, that was not.
Right,
funded.
I understand that, but
But
I'm just saying it's all
Whatever they
budget,
would-
I'm just saying, everything that we do is budget related, and we do have the power to move stuff, like,
But
that's,
that's very vague terminology, and there's details involved in all of this that, the processes that happen differently, right? I mean, the lack of funding for the coordinators was something that came after our budget was approved because it was negotiated that way outside of this budget discussion. So we could not have been ahead of that, we could not have changed that, right, in June when we approved our budget.
right, so what I'm saying is that if there's things that we know are, I don't know how to even word this. I feel like what I'm looking at, like with, I'm just gonna say for Dave Howard is a very valued member of this community, and it has been for a really long time, okay? And to continue, and it's not just because of the way he was, and I mean, yes, it's the way he was and his personality and stuff, but it's the program that developed for these students and how it was developed and how it's affecting, I mean, we would have kids, I mean, whenever time there's a program, we have kids that come to the mic that let us know what's being done and what's not being, you know what I mean? Like if you get rid of it, this is what it did for me, X, Y, and Z. So I guess what I'm looking at is I feel like we're always trimming in categories that greatly affect students. And I would like to see some other categories hit, but that, I mean, I know I'm just gonna beat my wheels because it's the,
I guess, maybe I don't know something that you do, I'm just curious, are they getting rid of theater at Northern? Is no one else gonna take that on, because he's gone? I
well,
don't think that's
here's
true,
the
right?
question, is all of his categories replaced right now? That would be a question. And I'm gonna say that probably not, because we're in negotiations, correct? Right?
You mean they have all of his
Well, we're
classes
talking,
been
right, so
assigned?
we're talking about getting rid of classes, right? Every time somebody retires, you have to evaluate if we're gonna keep it or not, correct?
Well, negotiations isn't gonna affect the students have already tallied for the courses. I mean, they're already planning for the number of people who need to cover what courses. Students have signed up for those already. It's not like those are gonna go poof during negotiations. Like
They
that's
already
already
know what
adjusted.
kids wanna take what classes,
Right.
because they had to sign up for classes in the spring.
Right, based on who is teaching those classes, correct?
No, actually, they'll find the teacher
No,
to
it's
teach
just
that
based on
class.
the class.
And that happens with every social studies teacher who retires and every PE teacher who retires at every level, all of those things are
Accounted
filled.
for.
I mean, that's what attrition is being able to find other people to assume that work still needs. I mean, again, as you said, and again, I still am not really sure why we're meddling in this particular topic, but I mean, it's not a replaceable position.
We're
But-
meddling,
A
we're
person.
meddling because we have the power to say, trim the budget, or, we have the power to do that,
But
correct?
we have the power, but are we supposed to be saying, we want you to hire another drama teacher?
No.
Specifically for that,
No, I'm just saying.
do whatever you want with the other 15 FTE, I mean, that's just, again, that's, I'm just, you know,
So-
ideologically,
Based on something that you'd said before, when you said, it seems that where we make cuts are the things that impact students. And I might make the argument that absolutely everything we do impacts students. But what I think you're referring to is specifically directly impacting them as opposed to indirectly. Because I know in the past you've mentioned before what's up with the instructional coaches. And that's something that you seem to feel would be something to cut, to trim, because that doesn't directly impact the student. Am I in the right
I would,
field here?
yep, I would say absolutely, and exactly, you know what I mean? So I think what that does to me is, that's something that is, yeah, that would be a category that I would zero in on.
So can I ask what your request would be then to the administration, if we could call another special meeting in a week, which we could, you know, what is your ask for them to represent to us? You wanna see less money spent on the fund balance? You wanna see less money spent on people? I mean, what would you ask them to do to bring back to us?
Yeah, I think we're already gonna come on it, we got a new superintendent coming in, 2 weeks, and this is where this is one of the things that's made important to him is our finances. So I would like to revisit it, I'd like to sit down as a team and go over and just look at what makes sense. I mean, a lot of times I think when we get handed this, and yes, it's my job to look this over and go over things and such, but I also think that there's some categories that, you know, I would like to sit down as a team in front of the public and discuss it openly. You know, but, I mean,
I guess, why aren't we doing that now, and if you know what categories you're referring to, what are they?
well, yeah, that's,
Or are you just generally saying that you don't feel like you know enough, you don't know enough specifics?
well, and I think
that.
a lot of the things is too, is that this is like, for instance, we're handing, you know, the annual general budget for the post for, you know, for different things, for, you know, the amendments and stuff, and then we're gonna hit for the proposed for budget, for next year's budget and stuff we just have to listen to. It's a lot of numbers, a lot of crunching numbers. So I'd like to start this year off, you know, and find ways that, I don't know, I'm just probably spinning my wheels here, so.
But we wanna make sure that you feel like you understand the budget and where the numbers are and where they go. You know, and maybe there's something that we can do to try to help walk you through maybe some of the more particulars, but not on the day that we actually have to approve the budget when it's, you know, we're right up against the deadline.
Yeah.
Maybe something that we can try to incorporate some learning with you along with the new superintendent, as throughout the year, so you can see, get a little bit of a deeper dive into some of these numbers.
So maybe what I'm looking at is maybe a proposal, like we just had a meeting on the 10th, right? And we had a finance meeting on the week before. So changing dates maybe would help to have, you know, for the future going forward, just have something else that's like this earlier than the 20th, and then on the 20th coming back to this again, if that makes sense.
So like one more.
I mean, you take a look at what we've been through for the last, you know, 2 times, this is a lot. This is a lot for us, and it's a lot of money going out, we're spending the taxpayers' dollars on stuff. You know, and I, you know, kind of wonder, is it all necessary, or is it just, you know, we're just spending money because we have extra money to spend? I don't know, but I'm looking at it is that when I first looked at the budget, when I first came on and I looked at things and stuff and where we were at and seeing where we're at now, and I know, and even just minusing off the ESSER funds, it's a lot of millions of dollars.
So how?
And we just lost, I mean, we're losing people. We're having a struggle having students come to our school right now, and I mean, I'm gonna say it's not just the birth rate, it's other things, because I call the charter schools, I call the Christian schools, I call the homeschool building, it's everywhere. So what are we missing here? And the budget is really driven by what we do, by what's happening, what the future's looking like. If we're gonna be lacking students and stuff, and so I guess I'm looking at,
So do you think in an era where everything costs more year over year, that we should be spending less to improve ourselves to attract more students? I don't see how that lines up.
well, in order to attract students, if we're not fiscally responsible, at some point, the ship's gonna go down, right? I mean, at some point, I don't wanna
I'd be hard pressed to find in here in any of our budgets where we've been fiscally irresponsible. I think the finance office has done an amazing job year after year of.
I agree, but we're coming into some turbulent waters, okay? And I think the thing of it is not to increase, it's to decrease. If you're gonna say, it's a company, we're running a company right now, and we're in a company of educating students. So in order to save us for the future, I think I'd like to see it trimmed a little bit more. I'd like to come under, we're way under. We're under, so we're in a safe zone, but
So
that's personally just me, so.
I wonder, because you said you looked over the budget, there was a lot going on. Did you then go to finance and have a meeting with Julie or anyone in the finance department to answer some of those questions?
No, I didn't. What I did is I compared numbers to what we were spending in the back. I went back and I looked at track records. I looked at the data and I looked at where we were going. And it seems like the spending is going this way, while the student thing is going this way.
So do you know why?
That makes no sense. Do I know why we have,
From looking at
I
that.
know the question I've asked before for finance, why the tick of the increase is ESSER. Okay, so let's just take ESSER off the table. We didn't have ESSER back, 4 years ago. Let's just take it off the table. What was the budget back then? And I don't understand the increase, and it's a lot. It's not like $750,000 or $1 million, it's millions of dollars. So as we keep spending money, you know what I mean, our enrollment is going down, and it sounds like it's gonna continue to go down from what we're projecting and such, for what we have for people sign up for classes, or what we have for kindergarten roundup or whatever. So I guess what I'm looking at is, at some point, are we gonna get to a point where we're gonna have to omit buildings or omit, you know what I mean? Like, what does that look like? Do we wanna really do that in Forest Hills?
But Holly, do you have an objective concern that that's where we're headed? That was the last question I just asked. We've added to the fund balance this year, right? So we have taken in more than we spent this year. We have increased our savings. Next year, with this proposal, even with a $2 million, deficit essentially on paper, without even wages negotiations built in, we're still projected at 13.5% of fund balance at the end of next year. Those
Right.
are safe numbers. That's where we're hoping to be. That's all part of this smoothing out in these times where everything is costing more.
And that's with the typical of, okay, we're gonna be spending this much of our fund balance, and it usually ends up, we don't spend that much of the
Right.
fund
When
balance.
you
and
see
the
our
year
proposed
it's
fund
actually
balance
better
from
than that.
This time last year, our fund balance is higher now than we proposed last year.
Right,
So I just don't understand why you think we're like a sinking ship, or that it's not like we're still only taking in 100 million and we're spending 150, right? Our revenues have increased as well, so we have more money to be able to spend.
with the fund balance, it's the taxpayers' money that we're holding on to, correct?
I don't even know what that means, really. I don't know what you're saying.
The fund balance, the 19 million or whatever that's projected to be in there, where did the money come from?
Yes, yes, that's money that every taxpayer has paid in and that we have received from all sorts of sources into our general fund, largely from the state of Michigan, into that fund, right?
So
What
what
was your thought? We should not have a fund balance?
I'm not saying we're not should have a fund balance, what I'm saying is that if we're gonna do it, is the whole goal to put back into the fund balance, or is the whole goal to actually balance, or to come down on the budget? I'm looking at it from.
Coming down on the budget would add to the fund balance.
If you're projecting, we're gonna spend what, 138 million?
133 for next year, which is
133.
$5 million less than we spent this year.
Right, 5 million less because you gotta take the ESSER funds out of that, so.
No, ESSER funds came out of both sides.
Yeah, they came off of.
So and what did we start off with our budget in 2019 and 2020? About 153.
But
And
what was our income in 2019? That's the thing, right? If a company brings in more money, they have more money to spend. We have more money to spend on our people.
I'm probably not explaining this, but I'll let you sign.
Okay.
Just move on.
And I mean, and I
So I just wanted
think
to have the
part of it,
information.
yeah,
Yeah.
when
Well,
you
I
have
have
the
the
information,
information, I'm looking at the
If
data,
you-
and I'm watching the trend, and I'm paying attention to the other stuff that's out there, and I feel like there's some areas that we definitely could.
a couple things I just wanna note, I just played in my calculator here. You know, compared to 4 years ago, you said, you know, we keep spending more and more and more. Well, 115 years ago, or 115 years ago, 115 years ago, we probably didn't spend a whole heck of a lot. In 2020, 4 years ago, our expenditures were 115 million. 115 million in 2024 is the same as 137 million today.
And why is that?
Inflation.
It's 2%.
It's inflation, you put it in, and inflation varies, so, you know,
Didn't do
more
that,
in some years, less than others, but, so if you had $115 million in 2020, that's the same as 137 million today, and we're actually proposing 133 million for next year. So that would be a savings when you're comparing 2020 dollars to 2024 dollars. But I think what, the bigger point here, I think, is we do wanna be fiscally responsible. We wanna make sure we're offering the programs that kids want, that everybody needs, that we provide an excellent education. And I think that, but coming in and looking at it and going, I think we should cut instructional coaches and we should cut this little thing here and there, that's just taking a whack at something without having the full picture. I think putting together, when our new superintendent comes in, one of the things that we want to do is do a strategic plan where we look at all of the programs, at everything that we're doing, seeing what aligns with what we want to do and what aligns with where we want to go. Do we need to change things? Do we need to take some things out? Do we need to add other things? And putting together a whole big budget picture from that. And I think that makes more sense as looking forward rather than looking at it and going, all right, in the next 10 days, I want to take $2 million off of something just because I want to take $2 million off.
I'm just asking for the conversation with it, which we don't do. We glean the information and then we vote. And yes, we do ask questions on the side, Brandon. But, I saw you going, yeah, but what I'm saying is that your information that you received, does the public know about it? Have you let the public know about the information that you've received in asking the question?
So I can see why you're saying that, because you think that the public needs to know absolutely every single thing, and it would be nice if all of that was transparent. As I'm saying, that's not my job to make that transparent, that's the district's job. But it's my job to fully understand what is going on with the various things that are being spent, and to hear what the people in public, they care about, what they want, and to say, you know what, I have been elected to this position because people know that I am asking questions of the people within the district. I'm learning from the community, and when I weigh those things, I say, okay, this is being done well. And so then that is my vote. I don't feel like I need to explain every single thing that I do. It's not even possible. The time spent listening to people can't be spent also, like, I don't know what I need to put out there. That's the district's job. So I do feel like I don't need to explain every single thing. I hope that people trust that I am listening and learning, and that I come prepared, and that my vote is for a reason. So that's how I view it. I don't need to, I mean, if somebody wants to talk to me and say, why did you do that? I could explain why, but nobody's asking that question. He asked the question. I don't know, I feel like these are questions that should have maybe been explored prior to the meeting. And that's my feelings on that one. And I don't feel like it needs to be explored during the meeting. People can ask me afterwards.
But this is where when we're having our meetings, when the questions are being asked, the answers are being made in a public format, instead of being picked up on the phone and being asked, and then you decide yourself, that's not your job to put it back out there. And I'm completely the opposite. I feel like it is our job to share the information, additional information that's out there if somebody hasn't asked for it, because it actually gives the voters an opportunity to see the full picture. And they elected us to be the representatives. So for us to be transparent back with them, I in my opinion, I view that's very, I view that very highly, that's what I got. So some of the questions I'm asking, I would rather have the conversation here than a phone call here and here and here and here and here for stuff. If I don't, you know what I mean, if I haven't gotten the answers, sometimes somebody else has, and I can draw it out, but I can only do this in a meeting when the 7 of us are present, right?
But what you really should be
No.
doing is getting the answers to your
Right.
questions ahead of time, because.
Not from us, but from the
Yes,
district.
because
I'm not
we're
saying
not the
from
ones
you,
that
I'm
have
just
all of
saying
the
it's-
answers, it would be Julie or
And
Christine
I
or
understand
Scott
that,
that
and
have the answers.
I am getting the answers, I'm reviewing the data, I'm looking at a trend. I'm looking at a trend and I'm looking at it from a different lens.
Okay.
I'm looking at it from a business lens right now.
Again, but
so.
bringing it up here where we don't have your data, we don't know what you've been looking at, we're not in a position to answer some of the types of questions you're asking. The experts that run
And I'm
those
not saying that
departments
having you
are.
guys answer the questions, I wanna have the discussion, because it's.
What discussion can you have if nobody has the same information that you have?
It's an interpretation of the information.
We
So
can't
you
have an
should have
intelligent
interpretation.
discussion if you have data that none of us have.
We can
Okay.
have this discussion.
All right, I think we have exhausted discussion